Hi folks, my name is Girish, the host for Back2Basics, another Back2Basics for another week for season 2. Today we're going to talk to you about NFT, photographs, videos, maybe not, maybe photos only. But we'll get into the details of what NFT is and why is it so important in nowadays world, and why can't we just take pictures the way it is? So why don't we just get to the details of that with the guest of mine today. His name is Hugh Brown, and he's an amazing person. Amazing person. I just spoke with him a few minutes before we start recording, and he's a gem of a person. So Hugh, how are you? And thanks for coming back to basics.
Good, Girish. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you. So let's go dive right in. I mean, you are a photographer and just amazing stuff that you do. And I went to your website and it seems like you are pretty much all over the place when it comes to photographs. What made you get into this field?
So there's two levels to that. I was I studied law and then was working in strategy consulting. And in 1998, I moved to the sort of one of the most remote parts of Australia and had this feeling that I wouldn't be there very long. And so each weekend, because I thought my time there was going to be short, I'd go and see as much of that part of the country as I could. So, each weekend, some weekends I'd drive up to 2,500 kilometres in a weekend. And I took a camera along with me, and it was sort of there were two components to it. There was adventure and then there was the camera. And I couldn't have done the adventure without the camera, but I couldn't have done the camera stuff without the adventure. And in about 2004, I think it was, I decided to turn full time. And then in 2006, I did my first trip to Africa, and Africa opened me up to a world that I didn't know existed. I nearly didn't go and nearly didn't do the trip, and but so glad that I did. And literally that first trip to Africa, it was only 2 weeks, changed my life.
Yeah. Thank you again. How important is angles and lights when it comes to photographs? Can I just ask you a basic question on that?
Yeah, look, light is the most important thing in photography. And photography, the translation, I think was it Latin or Greek, one of the two. The Latin or Greek translation of photography is to paint with light. So if you haven't got decent light working, then most of the time, 99% of the time, you're effectively working without brushes. So lighting is everything, and you can have the most ugly subject, and if it's lit beautifully, it can look amazing, and you can have the most beautiful subject, and if it's ugly lit, then it looks terrible. So lighting is everything.
Do you think fake light is important or natural light is important, or does it really matter? What are your thoughts on that?
It depends what you define as fake light. But if I like to, the best light is that which is natural. And if you can't work with natural light, then the equivalent of that is making artificial light look natural. And if you can light a subject so that it doesn't look as though it's been artificially lit, then that's a nirvana, because it opens up so many different possibilities. I've never liked artificial lighting that looks artificial. It just looks wrong. So most of the time, my skills with artificial lighting not as strong as they are with natural lighting. So I tend to work with natural lighting.
Yeah, thank you again for that. It seems like a lot of people, they have different answers when it comes to photographs, because some people, they say fake light is awesome. Sometimes they say natural light is awesome. The other question now I have is, there are different types of events that we go to, the weddings and everything else. And myself, I'm a photographer, I'm a videographer, so I know what lighting is all about. But I guess my audience does not know. But let's say if we go to a wedding and an event, and the light, let's say, is magenta or pink or purple, do you think the semantics of the skin color changes and the design kind of changes for the photos, or do we just go white light, and how does that work?
Look, I'm not a wedding photographer, so you'd best talk to a wedding photographer. But obviously you want your skin tones to look as natural as possible because that's ultimately what you're capturing. And from what I understand, a lot of wedding photographers put a lot of time into the skin tones. And again, it sort of comes back to that. I think it still comes back to that same answer, that the challenge for any photographer, any field, is to make lighting, if it's artificial lighting you're using, not look artificial. And one of the interesting challenges I suppose I was doing a book a few years ago, and I was photographing, interviewing and photographing long-serving rail employees for one of the world's largest heavy haul railways. And one of the challenges I had was that everyone was wearing these ugly fluorescent shirts. And so there are a couple of different ways that I worked to get around that, or a few different ways that I worked to get around that problem, because the yellow just overpowered their faces, it overpowered everything. The first thing that I did was I split the book in two. So for every person I was going to photograph, and I needed about 2 or 3 photographs, half the photographs were going to be of them in their work environment, workplace, and the other half I decided to take them out of their work environment and put them in their private lives, what they like doing outside of work. The other thing that I did was where everything was yellow. The other thing that I tried to do was, given the yellows were so dominant, I would often take them and put them on a yellow background. I'm talking in a work environment as well. So, and what that would do was everything would be yellow. And so the things that stood out would be the things that weren't yellow, which in the case we're talking about was their face. And then a third strategy that I used was to use, lighting that you might think would look artificial, but in the context of on a heavy haul railway, it didn't look artificial. So, for example, it would be I put a red light on a red gel on their face, and that red gel might mirror the lighting from a railway signal light. So that's how I've tended to work in my environment when those challenges have arisen. As for a wedding sort of photographer, it's a bit hard for me to answer because I've always avoided weddings like the plague.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you again for answering that question. So let's talk about NFT, if that's okay with you. What
Yeah,
does
absolutely.
NFT stand for? Obviously, it's non-fungible token, but what does it mean to you?
To me, it represents a new direction in the art world and a new opportunity, and it's something that's completely confusing to me still. But it's something that I like the idea because it breaks with a lot of the traditional ways that things have been done. And as people, what tends to happen is that people could say the same about the music industry or whatever else. Channels evolve through which people can only, they become the channels through which you do things, and it becomes very hard to break out of those and do things differently. And I've always liked to do things differently and do things in my own way. And to me, NFTs represent an opportunity to market my art to a new group of people that perhaps in the past might not have been exposed to that form of art. And an opportunity, obviously, to monetize that as well. So, as much as we all do what we do for the love of what we do, and that's the fundamental reason, I do my work, it's because I love doing it, it feels important. You're still going to make a living, because if you're not making a living, you're not able to do what you're there to do.
Yeah, thank you again, Hugh Brown. So here, if you look at my screen, there's some few images of NFTs which I've given examples, and people can take a look at it. Uh, you think that NFT is more of a expression, or is it the new way to communicate with people or interact with people? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, it's all of that. It's a new form of expression. It's a new opportunity to express your work as art. Look, I actually think that it creates all sorts of possibilities, both for the artist, but also for the buyer of NFT art. And I say that because, typically, whether it be offices or houses or wherever you're displaying art, you've been limited to the piece of work that sits on the wall. And I'm talking, paintings or photography or whatever else. And you're limited to that one painting on the wall. And to change the presentation of the room that art is in, you have to literally take away that art and come back with something new. I actually like the opportunity that things don't have to be stored in vaults anymore, that they can be stored in a digital form so that works can be rotated. The areas in which those works are contained can be, freshened up with new work. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I think it creates a lot of opportunities in terms of for the artist, in terms of how you market the art, the rights that you sell with the art, the rights that you don't sell as well. And I think that's a fantastic opportunity, particularly as me speaking as a photographer.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you again. So, can we compare between what we used to do and what we're doing now? Let's say if we go to, let's say a let's say a baby shower or birthday party or something, and some people they have like a poster collage right before the hall, right? Is that considered NFT?
So a poster collage, as in a digital format, are you saying?
No, no, no. I'm just talking. Let's go back in time where we were back in the 80s and 90s. We take a poster and we put a whole bunch of pictures around the poster. Is that considered an NFT? Obviously, it'll
No,
be a
because
digital version, but does that mean that that's an NFT concept?
well, if it's in analog, so if it's printed on paper and all of that sort of stuff, then obviously no, it's not an NFT. An NFT represents a digital item, and look, I'm not an expert on this
Of
stuff,
course not.
but an NFT represents a digital image that is bundled with a series of digital rights.
Hmm.
And it's a different way of, because obviously in the 80s, the digital form was largely not around, if at all. So um, the NFTs are just a completely different way of, marketing and of presenting the work of painters, illustrators, photographers, and whoever else.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you. Do you think NFT is like a fad, or do you think this is the way we're thinking now?
Look, again, okay, my default response is I'm new to the space. My gut feel to a large extent is that I think it's here to stay. And I had it explained to me recently, or I saw it explained recently, that essentially we're in this crazy space where we're heading towards a thing called the metaverse, and we've heard about Facebook and that recently. And then at the other end, so you've got the metaverse at, say, one end of the spectrum. At the alternate end of the spectrum, you've got NFT art, and then in the middle, the transition pathway, we've got gaming. And from everything that I can see, and it's we're probably the same age, everything that I can see suggests that it's here to stay, that we're all headed towards this virtual space called the metaverse, where we'll be able to do all these sort of crazy things, like basically do everything in the metaverse that we can do in the physical world. We can go on holidays, we'll be able to play sport, we'll be able to go to movies, we'll be able to buy property, we'll be able to go to art galleries virtually, which we can do already now. But and then at our end of the space where we are, was the sort of foot in the water type thing, getting towards the metaverse, is this concept of NFTs. And it's a fascinating space. The whole, there's so many different ways you can bundle up NFT rights, and that and I'm only new to this space, but it introduces a whole new range of potential buyers of art, compared to what we used to buy. How people used to buy art.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you again. It seems like, I mean, yes, you are a photographer, but NFT's an expression of an artist, right? And it could be a photographer, a videographer, it could be a musician, it could be a programmer, because programmer is also in the back end is all about metaverse, right? And who creates this whole mess that we're in? Not really a mess, but a new world that we're getting into. So I think it's a
Yeah.
great platform that we're getting into. People have explained to me that NFT is bad for environment and bad for investment, but I feel in a different way that maybe it's actually great for us to interact and express art in a different form, and that's what you're doing. And I think so. Your latest event on this NFT, where did you go to get this? I think let's talk about that for a few minutes there.
So where the art came from?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that came from a trip I did a couple of trips to Indonesia some years ago. And I was photographing people that were working in an active volcano, mining sulfur by hand. And so I spent, I think, 3 weeks in the volcano with these. It was an active volcano, and I spent 3 weeks in the volcano with these miners, living with them, eating with them, doing whatever else with them. And yeah, one of the most incredible experiences in my life. I think the first night I slept on the mountain. There was an earthquake, I think 5.4, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was so exhausted, I slept through it. But it was fascinating because you're in one of the most tectonically active places on Earth. And a couple of those nights, I actually slept inside the volcano,
Mm.
just looking for different images and all of that sort of stuff. But at the time, I think there was anywhere between 150 and 300 sulfur miners. And what they did was they'd put these ceramic pipes into an active volcanic vent.
Mm.
And the gases from this vent came from a magma chamber about 20 kilometers directly below a crater lake that was the most acidic lake on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And the gases would come up at about 600 degrees Celsius, and they would enter these pipes, and the pipes would help condense the gases into a liquid. And then when the temperature of the liquid came out the end of the pipes and dropped below, I think it was 140 degrees Celsius, it would become molten sulfur. So these sulfur miners from villages around would come up daily to the volcano. They would chisel away blocks of this, and the average carry of the sulfur miners out of the volcano was about 70 kilograms.
Mm-hmm.
So to put that in context, that's about 170, 180 pounds per miner. And each of these miners only weighed about 55 kilograms, so they're carrying more than their body weight. They would carry up and out a treacherous path. And the volcano, when I was there anyway, was on the second highest level of alert. So basically an eruption was imminent. And they carried a kilometre up and out of the crater, which people had died carrying up out of that crater because it was so treacherous. And then they would carry it a further 3 kilometres down to 2 miles down to a drop-off point. And they were getting paid, in US dollar terms, they were getting paid 6.6 cents per kilogram carried. So if you're carrying an average load of 70 kilograms, you're only getting around about $4.50 US for carrying that 175, 180 pound load. And the fit sulfur miners would do it probably 2 times a day. And then there were a group of technicians inside the volcano that maintained the pipes. And that sulfur that they pulled out of the volcano would be used for, whitening sugar, for vulcanizing rubber, plastics production, and whatever else. It's just interestingly, these miners were famous around the world. When tourists would come and look at these people doing what they were doing because it was such an out of worldly experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you again, Hugh, for coming on the show. I have one last question, if you don't mind, and I ask this question
Yeah.
all the time to all the guests. What are your thoughts? What does back to basic mean to you?
It's an interesting question in the context of life at the moment with COVID. Um, to me, back to basics means multiple things that have direct relevance to what we're doing at the moment. So, for example, um, I think we need to get away from this throwaway world to regain self-sufficiency in much of what we do. You know, like if the world went to hell in a handbasket now and we had a Hurricane Katrina situation or Fukushima situation, and there was a breakdown in law and order, whatever it else, most people wouldn't have a clue. They couldn't change a tire. They couldn't start a campfire.
Hmm.
The second back to basics also means going back to period, common sense. So, and in the global sphere, what that means at the moment is the the world has become so interdependent that we don't know how to cope
Hmm.
when that elements of that interdependency break down. So, a cardinal rule of business is don't consolidate all your sourcing within one supplier. You don't consolidate all your sales within one buyer, because if that buyer or that supplier, something happens to them, then they all, the whole thing breaks down. And I think we're in this really risky period at the moment where the interdependency is being found wanting, and people are by necessity having to revert back to basics.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you again, Hugh, for coming here. And I guess you are very excited about the new journey that you're getting into, which is the NFT world. And hopefully you will do well. I know you will do well because you have done some phenomenal work, and I've seen it. And hopefully, when I have a little more extra time, I will start investing on NFT and start purchasing your items. So thank you again for all the stuff that you do. It's great. Thank you again.
That's fantastic, Girish. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Yeah, thank you again, Hugh, for coming on the show, and stay blessed and enjoy all the stuff that you do. Thank you again.
Thanks, Girish.
So, guys, we spoke with Hugh today and we talked about the basics of NFT. We talked about the basics of photos and how to take photos, how does lighting work, how does everything work, and what his new venture is all about. As usual, as always, there is a quote of the day, and hopefully Hugh would like that quote of the day. The quote of the day is: if you are an artist and want to be successful artist, then learn to convert your art into NFT art. I think that's what he's trying to do. That's what he's going to do. I know that, and I have faith in him. As usual, as always, what do we always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, comment as much as you can, good, bad, and ugly. Either way, it'll make my show strong, day by day, week by week, month by month, and this is what I do. I enjoy this stuff. And there are three things that we enjoy in this episode, or every episode that I've done so far. The content is amazing, the guest is awesome, and third of all, the host is the best. Guys, take care, God bless, and stay blessed, and see you next week. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
Clients or selling a product, and your thought about the people you're selling to is that they are idiots. You're like, here, I'm going to sell this to you, you idiot. That's going to convey. They're not going to want to buy from you because they can feel that sense of like condescension or judgment or whatever that is. And you would be surprised how many people in sales have that kind of a thought process going about the people that they're supposed to be serving.
Mm.
Instead of something like that, choose something more helpful, right? So, something like this can really help them is a really helpful mantra. Something like, you know, I, I'm going to learn something new in this interaction, or what a great opportunity to get to know somebody. All of these messages that we give ourselves influence how we show up. And
Mm.
so that is something you can sort of make a conscious choice about. I would not suggest that you purposefully test this by going, I'm so annoyed. I'm going to be really
Of course not.
annoyed. I'm
Of
very
course not.
annoyed. And then just see if people pick that up because,
Mhm.
you know, that
Yeah,
could be
definitely,
challenging.
for sure.
Yeah.
The thing is, what I realized in this couple of years that we've got into this COVID mess, okay, what I have noticed is, are we concentrating on communication more now versus